They actually had the audacity to tell me that I was overreacting. My own mother and father, standing there, blocking the door, shouting over the sound of my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, whose screams were tearing through the house, tearing through my chest. Because their precious daughter, my sister, had just smeared a thick glob of industrial strength chili paste directly into Lily's eyes. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was malice, a deliberate act of cruelty carried out in front of my very eyes, and when I went to dial 911, my parents physically restrained me, yelling, "Family, you can't ruin her life over a little accident. An accident." My daughter was hysterical, clawing at her face, blinded by fire, and they called it an accident. I stood there, phone gripped so tightly my knuckles were white, staring at the three of them, my sister, smug and defiant behind my parents' protective wall, and my mother and father, their faces twisted with an infuriating mix of fear and misplaced loyalty. I had a choice right there. Let the system handle this, or let my fury take over and make them all feel a fraction of the agony they allowed my child to endure. Was I wrong for the calculated, ice-cold revenge I executed over the next 2 weeks? Tell me, honestly, if you would have simply walked away and let them get away with it. This whole nightmare, this slow-motion train wreck of a family drama, didn't start with chili paste. It started years ago, back when my sister, Clara, was diagnosed with the terminal disease of being the golden child. I was always the quieter one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need saving or praising. Clara was the volatile one, the artist, the one who struggled in school and therefore, in my parents' warped logic, needed constant, unwavering support and forgiveness. She could crash the family car, fail out of college, or run up thousands in debt, and it was always, "Poor Clara, she's so sensitive." When I had Lily 5 years ago, I thought maybe, just maybe, the sheer innocent joy of a grandchild would reset the dynamic, that they would finally see a bigger picture. For a while it seemed to work. Lily, with her sunshine curls and infectious giggle, was the perfect distraction, a small, bright light that even Clara couldn't dim. I married a wonderful man, Mark, who understood the baggage of my family and wisely kept his distance. We lived about an hour away, which was the perfect buffer. We would visit my parents every other Sunday, a ritual of duty and dread, but we'd only bring Lily when Clara wasn't going to be there, a scheduling trick that kept the peace. The problem was, Clara had just been dumped by her long-term boyfriend, had been fired from her 4th job in 2 years, and had predictably moved back into my parents' house, occupying her old room like a resentful queen. This meant every single family gathering was now a high-wire act of managing Clara's moods. She'd sulk, she'd make passive-aggressive comments about my stable life, about my boring husband, about how Lily was too loud or too clingy. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just temporary, that she'd get a job and move out soon. The fateful Sunday started innocently enough. It was my father's birthday, and I knew I couldn't skip it. I had baked his favorite cake, and Mark had actually agreed to come, thinking maybe a shared birthday moment would mellow Clara out. It did not. As soon as we walked in, Clara, who was sipping a suspiciously strong, smelling iced tea, made a comment about Lily's new dress, saying it looked like something a clown would wear. I shot her a glare, but my mother immediately jumped in. "Oh, Clara, you have such a unique eye for fashion." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Later, while we were trying to take a family picture, Lily toddled up to Clara, who was scrolling on her phone, and sweetly asked if she could see the funny kitty video Clara was watching. What happened next was a blur of pure, unjustified cruelty. Clara didn't even look up. She just reached over to the table where we had a platter of appetizers, picked up the small condiment bowl, the one my dad loves for his homemade super spicy Korean gochujang chili paste, and in one swift, sickening motion, she reached out and wiped a liberal amount of the thick, red paste onto Lily's face. Not her cheek, not her chin, right into her eyes. The world stopped. 1 second, Lily was giggling, and the next, she let out a shriek that was primal, a sound of absolute, blinding terror and pain. She collapsed to the floor, hands flailing at her face, rubbing the paste in deeper. I was across the room, but I was on her instantly, scooping her up, screaming for a sink, for water, my own panic a cold, sharp blade. Mark was right behind me, dragging her towards the kitchen, plunging her head under the faucet. My parents, meanwhile, were frozen, their faces masks of shock, but that shock quickly morphed into defensiveness. Clara, the instigator, simply stood up, looked at the chaos, and coolly said, "Well, she shouldn't have been bothering me. It'll teach her a lesson." That sentence, that utterly devoid of remorse sentence, flipped a switch inside me. I left Mark struggling to flush Lily's eyes out and stormed back into the living room, grabbing my phone. I saw Lily's tiny face, red and swollen, and heard her ragged, gasping cries, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed help. I needed an authority figure. I was dialing 911, my voice shaking as I started to explain what my sister had done, when my mother's hand shot out and slapped the phone out of my ear. "Stop it, you lunatic. She didn't mean it. She was just stressed." My father stepped in front of me, his huge body a physical barrier. "You will not call the police on your sister. We are family. We handle this internally." I was screaming at them, asking if they even cared that their granddaughter was in excruciating pain, but they didn't see Lily. They only saw Clara's impending arrest, her ruined life, her sensitive spirit being crushed. They were protecting the abuser, and by doing so, they were actively participating in the abuse. I looked from my father's desperate, pleading eyes to my mother's hard, set jaw, and finally to Clara, who was now leaning against the door frame, a tiny, triumphant smirk playing on her lips, and in that moment, the love I had for them evaporated, replaced by a cold, searing resolve. I called Mark over, who had finally managed to get Lily's crying down to whimpers, her eyes streaming and bloodshot. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "we're leaving, now. And when we leave, we are never coming back until they beg for forgiveness." My parents started to object, but Mark, who had seen everything, simply nodded, picked up Lily and carried her out. As I walked past Clara, I leaned in and whispered, "You think this is over. You just messed with the wrong mother." The next few days were hell. Lily was okay, thankfully, though her eyes were sensitive for a while, and she was terrified of any red condiment. My parents called constantly, not to ask about Lily, but to demand I apologize to Clara for making a scene and threatening to call the authorities. I ignored them all. I didn't want an apology. I wanted justice. I realized the police route was messy and likely to result in a minimal charge, which my parents would use to fuel the victim narrative for Clara. No, this required something more personal. It required the slow, agonizing dismantling of their perfect, skewed little world. They valued their reputations, their comfort, and their gold, plated golden child. I decided to target all three. My plan began by gathering information. I knew Clara was an aspiring, but frankly terrible, artist who used my parents' basement as a studio. They had bragged about paying for a huge art show she was supposed to have in the city next month, an event they had invited all their wealthy friends to, an event designed purely to showcase Clara's talent and restore her confidence. This was the first domino. I also knew that my father, a semi-retired financial advisor, was obsessed with his pristine reputation and had a private investment portfolio with a few specific clients whose business he cherished, clients he often met at a very particular high-end golf club. I started small. First, I found the website for Clara's upcoming art show. Under the artist bio section, I didn't hack it or ruin it. I just went to a local print shop, and had a few hundred small, professional-looking, identical flyers printed. These flyers were titled, in elegant script, an honest look at the artist. The text was simple, yet devastating. It described in meticulous detail the incident with Lily, mentioning Clara's utter lack of remorse and the protective actions of her enabling parents. It didn't call for a boycott. It just presented the facts of her character. The day before the show, I paid a young man to discreetly place one of these flyers under the windshield wiper of every single car in the parking lot of the gallery, and crucially in the parking lot of my father's golf club. Then came the second part of the plan, targeting my father's precious reputation. I knew the names of his two biggest and wealthiest clients, people he had handled money for decades. I crafted a very formal, very respectful email from a burner account. I explained that I was reaching out as a concerned family member and client, and I simply mentioned that due to a serious ethical and legal lapse involving an act of violence against a minor in my father's home and my father's subsequent actions to obstruct justice, I felt it was my moral obligation to inform them that his judgment was perhaps compromised and that their funds might be better handled by a fiduciary with a clearer moral compass. I signed it anonymously as a concerned friend of the family. I hit send and watched the fireworks from a safe distance. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that tasted the sweetest, involved their comfort. My parents had an immaculate, expensive home, and they were fanatic about their lawn and their prize-winning rose bushes. I bought a commercial, grade bottle of liquid lawn dye, the kind they use to make fields look green in a drought, but in a vivid, obnoxious bubblegum pink. And I bought several kilograms of the strongest, most potent, foul-smelling liquid fish fertilizer I could find. Under the cover of a moonless night, I drove back to their house. I wore all black gloves and a ski mask. I systematically doused every single one of my mother's pristine, white rose bushes with the industrial, strength pink dye. Then I turned my attention to the front lawn. I used a sprayer to apply the fish fertilizer liberally, focusing heavily on the main entrance and the front porch. The smell would be not just offensive. It would be crippling, clinging to the air for weeks, maybe months, especially in the warm, late summer air. I wanted them to not just see the mess, but to physically smell the rot they had fostered. I finished my work, and as I drove away, I saw the first hints of pink on the roses, and the silence of the night was broken only by the cold, hard satisfaction that had finally settled in my gut. So that's the situation I was in. They protected a cruel monster and actively facilitated my daughter's suffering, and my response was to attack their vulnerabilities, their reputation, their pride, and their comfort. Before I tell you about the absolute nuclear meltdown that followed, I want you to pause this video, go down to the comments, and tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Did I go too far? Or was every action I took simply the natural consequence of their shocking betrayal? The explosion was immediate and spectacular. I found out about the art show first. My best friend, who still lives in the area and was trying to support me, sent me a picture of the scene. The gallery was nearly empty. All the guests who had shown up were standing outside, reading the flyers, whispering, and looking over at Clara and my parents with expressions of utter disgust. My mother, bless her heart, had tried to rip the flyers up, but there were simply too many. Clara had been forced to leave early, her big comeback ruined, her self-importance shattered. She had apparently had a screaming fit in the gallery parking lot, demanding to know who could possibly hate her this much. My mother called me, not to ask if I had anything to do with it, but to absolutely, hysterically rail at me for leaving and not being a supportive family member to Clara, even after all this. I simply said, maybe the truth just hurt, and hung up. The calls from my father were worse. He called me from his office, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. My client, Mr. Henderson, just pulled his entire portfolio. He asked me if I was unstable, if I was capable of assaulting children. What the hell did you do? I played innocent. Me, Dad? Why would you think I had anything to do with your business partners? Maybe they just read something they didn't like. He didn't believe me for a second, but he couldn't prove anything. The damage was done. The loss of Mr. Henderson was a major financial blow, but the true devastation was the loss of face, the damage to his carefully constructed persona of the ethical, trustworthy advisor. He was a man obsessed with appearances, and now his own daughter had, in his eyes, irrevocably tainted his professional life. Then came the final, stinking realization. That morning, my mother had called me again, this time not angry, but sounding physically ill. Your father and I can't even stand to be in the house, she choked out. The smell, it's indescribable. It's like rotting fish mixed with something sickly sweet, and the front yard, it's all pink. Everything is ruined. Our beautiful roses are pink. The smell is making me gag. The fish fertilizer, notorious for its long, lasting, penetrating odor, combined with the bright pink lawn dye, was their own personal, nauseating monument to their poor choices. She was begging me not to come over, but to send someone, anyone, to help them clean it up. I listened to her pleas, her genuine distress over her ruined home, and I felt nothing but a cold, hard sense of balance. You know, Mom, I said, my voice soft, maybe you should try washing it out with some hot water and soap. Rubbing it deep into the stain usually helps. It's a terrible feeling, isn't it? That burning, the smell. Helplessness, now you know how Lily felt. I hung up the phone and turned it off. For 2 weeks, I received no more angry calls, only desperate, pleading texts from my mother about the smell, from my father about his business, and from Clara, bizarrely, about how I was just as bad as she was for ruining her art show. I ignored them all. My focus was Lily, healing her trauma, reassuring her that her home was a safe place. Mark and I had decided we were done with them permanently. We were not going to subject our daughter to that kind of toxic loyalty again. I eventually got one final, long email from my father. It was rambling, but buried deep within the defensive prose was a single, true apology. Not for Clara's actions, but for their own failure as parents. He admitted that they had prioritized Clara's perceived fragility over Lily's actual safety and my well-being. He didn't ask me to come back, only to consider that they were imperfect, flawed people. I read it, acknowledged its existence, and filed it away. It wasn't enough to forgive, but it was enough to close the chapter. They had their comfort stripped away, their reputations ruined, and their golden child faced the consequences of her actions. My conscience is clear. I protected my child, and I delivered a lesson that the legal system would have been too gentle to teach. I made them feel the consequences of cruelty, and I made it hurt. I haven't spoken to them since, and my life has been quieter, safer, and infinitely happier for it. The peace of mind I gained is worth more than any strained family bond. This story is a harsh reminder that family ties don't give people the right to abuse you or your children, and sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to cauterize it completely. If you agree that I was right to protect my daughter at all costs, and that they deserved every bit of the pain I inflicted, please hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to the channel right now for more stories of justice, revenge, and the complex messes of family life. Share your final, uncensored thoughts on my revenge plan and their eventual fate in the comments section below. I want to know what you think of this whole mess. I'll see you all in the next story.